Both of these are the Korean option and the German-Norwegian option, if I can put it that way. Both of them fulfill the requirements, the very high requirements for the Canadian Navy. There's nothing I see that would suggest that we would have a mixed fleet in submarines.
In New York, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood before reporters and made his announcement. Canada will not split the submarine contract. The United States is no longer even considered. Only Germany, Norway, or South Korea remain in the running. Carney insisted that one fleet is more efficient, easier to maintain, and cheaper to operate. He pointed to common parts and smoother repair cycles as the reason. But the symbolism overshadows the details. For decades, Canada's military purchases flowed south, reinforcing trust with Washington. That habit is now broken. Carney has deliberately pushed the United States out at the very moment when tariffs are straining the relationship. What he describes as independence looks far more like isolation. And in that isolation, the risks begin to mount. The numbers are staggering. 12 conventional submarines worth more than $20 billion. Carney promises that jobs and investment will follow, yet both bids are full of risks. The German-Norwegian option is NATO-approved but slow. Canada would line up behind existing orders from Germany and Norway, pushing delivery into the 2030s. Every year of delay means higher costs and an aging fleet at home. The South Korean option is flashier. It promises quicker delivery, with the first submarine by 2032, and a bundle of sweeteners: lithium battery plants, LNG tie-ins, aerospace deals, even critical minerals partnerships. But this submarine has never been exported. Canada would be the first buyer, taking on untested risks with billions in taxpayer funds. Carney sells these bids as leverage, yet they expose Canada to delay, cost overruns, and empty promises. Canadians pay up front, while the benefits remain uncertain. Carney claims this decision shows strength and independence from Washington, but the opposite is true. Trump's reciprocal tariffs were designed to bring Canada back to the table. Mexico found a way to adapt. Europe cut a deal. Canada, under Carney, stumbled. Now, by cutting the United States out of defense procurement, Ottawa has destroyed one of the last bargaining chips it had left. Billions of Canadian tax dollars that once flowed into U.S. defense contracts, helping to soften Washington's stance, are now being redirected overseas. Yet the tariffs remain. Trump's steel, aluminum, and auto duties are still hammering Canadian producers. Prices are climbing, jobs are at risk, and families are paying more for daily necessities. Carney has given up influence in Washington while gaining nothing in return. The tariffs stand. Trump's leverage grows. Ottawa is the side exposed. Carney wanted a stage in New York to project confidence. Instead, he highlighted weakness. Canada is moving further away from its strongest ally while taking on risky commitments abroad. The strategy does not strengthen Canada's position, it weakens it. The risks are immediate and long-term. German subs may not arrive for years. Korean subs may never live up to the hype. The jobs and industrial benefits Carney promises could evaporate once the contracts are signed. Washington will not ignore this. A Canada that excludes American suppliers will find little sympathy when the next tariff talks begin. Trump will press harder, knowing Ottawa has lost leverage. And at home, taxpayers will shoulder the cost of a deal that could drain $20 billion or more from public finances with little to show for it. For ordinary Canadians, the consequences will be real. Higher prices from tariffs, weaker trust with the U.S., and billions tied up in a submarine program full of risk. Carney promised strength. Instead, he has isolated Canada, gambled with taxpayer money, and weakened the country's position under Trump's pressure. This deal was meant to mark independence. Instead, it stands as proof that Carney's policies backfire, leaving Canada more vulnerable, not stronger.
We're over the shock, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves.
Both Canada and Mexico want to save North America-wide free trade, but they both know that they can't control what the U.S. does. So there's also an effort to grow bilateral trade between Canada and Mexico, which is still tariff-free.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has been everywhere but home.
One week it is Mexico, the next week Europe.
Prime Minister has just arrived in Europe. Mark Carney will spend the next few days meeting with political leaders to discuss securing a ceasefire for Ukraine. He's also shoring up economic alliances in the face of President Donald Trump's trade war.
Always with the same message: Canada can somehow break free from dependence on the United States. Cameras capture him shaking hands in Warsaw, smiling in Berlin, and sitting down in Mexico City with CEOs. To the casual viewer, it might look like leadership. Scratch the surface and you see a prime minister in panic mode, running from crisis to crisis, desperate to prove he has a plan. He talks about corridors, partnerships, frameworks. He collects communiques and photo ops. Diplomacy fills the album. The grocery cart tells a different story. Families are paying more and getting less. If a strategy is measured by outcomes, not slogans, what exactly has changed for Canadians since this whirlwind began? Almost nothing. While Carney hops planes, Canadian households are stuck with the bill. Trump's reciprocal tariffs continue to hit steel, aluminum, autos, and a long tail of inputs that raise costs across the economy. China retaliates on canola and other farm exports, squeezing producers who already face higher fertilizer, equipment, and transport costs. Ottawa's answer was to quietly scrap many retaliatory tariffs on American goods right before the Europe trip. Supporters said it was pragmatic. Critics called it surrender. Either way, import prices are still elevated, supply chains are still disrupted, and exporters are still boxed in by two giants. Carney promised to stand elbows up against Washington. Instead, he folded early and asked Canadians to carry the burden at the checkout line. That is not strategy. That is cost shifting dressed up as diplomacy. Every week that passes, more businesses warn they cannot hold out much longer. The partners Carney pins his hopes on are hardly stable. Europe is distracted. France just watched a government collapse. Britain is wobbling with its own political fractures. These are not pillars ready to rescue Canada from a tariff storm. And Mexico, the other supposed escape hatch, is playing a careful game. Ottawa talks about a bilateral trade corridor and a united front for the 2026 USMCA review. On the ground, Washington is signaling openings for Mexico that Canada does not enjoy. If Mexico gets relief while Canada waits, the North American playing field tilts further. It means capital and supply chains chase certainty south, not north. Meanwhile, Europe wants critical minerals and energy assurances from Canada, but is in no position to shield Ottawa from Trump's tariff architecture. The truth is simple: every partner is negotiating for themselves first. Canada arrives with good intentions and leaves with nice press releases, but no real leverage. Carney's whirlwind diplomacy looks impressive on a map. At home, the cracks are wider. The economy is under pressure, exporters are blocked, and consumers face persistent price pain. The grand plan to outmaneuver Trump has not materialized into leverage. It has backfired into dependency. Canada is stuck between an America that sets the terms and a China that punishes without hesitation. The Prime Minister's answer is more travel, more panels, more statements about working groups and future frameworks. None of that pays the utility bill or rescues a shipment stuck behind a tariff wall. The verdict is clear. After all the rushing around, Canada is exactly where it started, only more tired and more expensive. The world is moving fast. Canada is spinning its wheels. And it is ordinary citizens who are paying for a strategy that confuses motion with progress, while their leader mistakes movement for victory. Frustration is building, and patience is running out. For many Canadians, the question is no longer whether Carney's plan works, it is whether he ever had one in the first place.
So today, as you know, Canada's new government is announcing the first set of projects that we believe are both in Canada's national interest and are feasible to be built.
That's just a Liberal pipe dream that they talk about forever. There's no oil pipeline on there. There's no plan for an oil pipeline. And These are baby steps that will not unleash the economy.
The warning signs are everywhere. While Donald Trump is accelerating America's economy with sweeping tariff leverage and rapid approvals, Canada is stumbling. Prime Minister Mark Carney promised Canadians a bold new era of nation building, urging the country to think big and act bigger. Yet, when the first list of so-called major projects was unveiled, what Canadians saw were recycled announcements and baby steps. LNG Canada Phase 2, the Darlington nuclear project, and an expanded Montreal port were already in motion long before Carney took office. Rebranding old projects does not create momentum, and it certainly does not meet the urgency of this moment. Instead of leading, Ottawa is lagging behind, while allies and competitors race forward. Families who were promised bold action are left asking, is this really all Canada can offer? The contrast could not be sharper. In Washington, Trump's administration has made deregulation a centerpiece, clearing permits at record speed and sending a clear message to investors: America is open for business. That approach has already pulled billions of dollars south. Enbridge and TC Energy, two of Canada's largest energy firms, openly admitted that most of their capital spending is shifting to the United States. Why? Because Canadian rules like Bill C-69, the emissions cap, and the tanker ban make new investment nearly impossible. Every delay, every layer of red tape pushes jobs and dollars out of Canada and into Trump's America. While our neighbor gains strength, Carney's government leaves Canadians with nothing but bureaucracy and excuses. Even smaller companies now face a brutal choice: keep waiting years for approvals at home or move operations to the U.S., where permits are granted in months. This is how a nation loses its competitiveness. Carney talks about a future of clean energy, AI-driven electrification, and national infrastructure, but his own policies stand in the way. Pipelines remain absent. An energy corridor connecting provinces, which could reduce dependence on the U.S. and open access to global markets, is nowhere on his list. Instead, the government hides behind legal jargon, claiming no private proponent exists. But industry leaders are clear: they will not invest under today's hostile framework. Even Carney himself admitted in meetings that he has a caucus to manage, signaling that internal liberal factions are dictating national policy. The environmental wing of his party demands restrictions, and the result is paralysis. Big promises meet small actions, and Canadians pay the price. Provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, rich in resources, are sidelined, while U.S. states next door are booming with Canadian capital. Every quarter that passes without real reforms means more missed opportunities, more capital flight, and more dependence on Washington. The verdict is plain. Trump's America is accelerating, while Carney's Canada is stalled at the starting line. The projects Ottawa promotes as nation-building are little more than recycled press releases. Without pipelines, without an energy corridor, and without bold reform, Canada risks being locked into permanent second place. The consequences are severe: higher costs for families under U.S. tariffs, lost jobs as companies chase friendlier conditions abroad, and the erosion of Canada's leverage in the global economy. Carney had the political capital to act decisively, but he chose hesitation. The opposition's warning is clear: if Ottawa continues to govern with baby steps while America takes giant leaps, Canadians will be left behind in their own continent. The gap is already visible, and unless Canada changes course quickly, that gap could become a canyon too wide to close.
If you were to, write a story about the economic impact of the tariffs thus far, what would the headline read?
Well, it's like we talked about last time. We expected investment, there would be a freeze. So what we've got now is two economies actually that are sliding, let's say, not in recession probably, but sliding in that direction. The trajectory is not a positive one for both the U.S. and Canada.
The warning signs are flashing red. Mark Carney came into office promising stability, but the backbone of Canada's economy is weakening by the day. Unemployment is climbing, with youth joblessness now running at double the national average. Layoffs have spread from factories to offices, and businesses have stopped hiring for months. Families once told to trust Ottawa's plan are instead staring at help-wanted boards that never get filled. Trump's tariff wall was always going to be a test, yet Carney has failed to shield the country. Instead of a clear strategy, Canadians are left with uncertainty, higher costs, and a government scrambling to explain why the nation is sliding into trouble. Carney insists his answer is massive new spending. Defense contracts, infrastructure schemes, and so-called catalytic investments are all advertised as the silver bullet. He claims that public money will attract private capital, building projects that will drive growth. But the reality is stark. Investment has frozen, companies have cut back, and confidence is evaporating. Ottawa's promises of partnership with business are ringing hollow as firms hold their cash instead of expanding. What Carney calls a shield looks more like a sieve, pouring billions into programs that swell the deficit but fail to deliver jobs. And here lies the deeper contradiction. By separating flashy investment pledges from everyday government spending, Carney pretends that deficits do not matter. Yet Canadians know better. Every dollar borrowed must be repaid, and every promise made without results erodes trust. Instead of spurring private growth, his so-called catalytic model has paralyzed decision-making. Projects stall while interest costs climb, leaving Canada weaker both fiscally and economically. The backfire is undeniable. Spending without results is not a shield, but a liability. For ordinary Canadians, the pain is no longer abstract. Prices are climbing as inflation trickles through the economy. At first, companies swallowed the hit, but now costs are landing squarely on consumers. Families are told to take pride in Buy Canadian campaigns and to stay home for their holidays. But this is not resilience, it is retreat. Retail sales may look stable, yet that stability comes from households giving up foreign trips and cutting back elsewhere. The truth is harsher. Consumer strength is masking a deeper collapse. And while Ottawa points to those numbers as proof of stability, the story on the ground is very different. Parents are cutting meals, students are delaying studies, and young workers are trapped in a shrinking job market. Youth unemployment near 15% is not a statistic, it is a warning siren. A generation that endured the pandemic is now losing faith in the future. Carney's policies have turned the cost of tariffs into a tax on families. Instead of relief, Canadians face the cruel reality that they are paying for both Trump's tariffs and Ottawa's mismanagement. Trump's tariffs were a heavy blow, but they also revealed the measure of Canada's leadership. While Washington imposed its will, Ottawa had a chance to respond with clarity and strength. Instead, Carney offered spending sprees, vague talk of catalytic investment, and rising red ink. The backbone of the economy is weakening because his strategy has failed. What was sold as a shield has backfired into higher debt, fragile growth, and lost confidence. Canadians can already feel it in their wallets and in their job prospects. And unless this government changes course, the damage will only deepen. The warning could not be clearer. Carney's backfire is exposed, and the worst may still lie ahead.